Hex Gaming now has the best value custom PS5 controller on the market, and it's not even close. In every aspect, this controller offers more onboard profiles, more swappable thumbstick caps, more features. The only thing that's not more is the price tag. And while there might be specific parts or components that I like from companies more, for example, you can spec out a 6 rear button option from Battle Beaver, or the snap plates and limited lifetime warranty from AIM, or the freakishly high right stick and pretty damn good rear buttons of Evil.
Evil? Evil, actually.
But unfortunately, there is one downside to this controller, and that is that you can't buy one right now. You can put your hard-earned shekels on the table, but you won't get this controller in hand for about 3 months. My lucky rump has been flicking the sticks for a little over a month, and I've got some thoughts. Let's get it.
This is your controller captain. We've reached 6,900 feet. Go ahead and start flicking the sticks and mollywopping the back paddles.
You don't like back paddles? How about those rear buttons? We've tested almost 100 custom and premium controllers, and we're only at the beginning. You need a thumbstick guide or tutorial on how to overclock your controller? Check out the controller playlist.
Bing bong.
Controller captain out.
A quick disclaimer to my audience, the Stallions and Stallionettes, this controller was sent for review, but this is going to be an honest, comprehensive review. I haven't been paid or told to say anything about it. Hex doesn't get an early preview, and all my thoughts are 100% my own. So if there's any cons, shortcomings, or areas of improvement, you're going to hear about it. So these companies make better products over time. A lot of breath there, but you know how the diddle goes. So these companies make better products over time, and they do. We critique them on YouTube. They make revisions or changes over time, and we get controllers like this 3 years into the PlayStation 5's life cycle. Better late than never, eh? So a little summary of what this controller is, because Hex is taking a different approach than any of their other models because they are doing a crowd-funded Kickstarter program to kind of boost their fundages before releasing the sucker into the wild. I'm going to touch on why all this is in just a mo, but on the top of their website, you can see they're plugging the Phantom's debut. Be the first to experience gaming perfection. Written that well, how the shit can you not click on it? But as you can see, they are plugging a Kickstarter program. I have that pulled up over here. And here's the dates because that's the most important thing. This campaign is starting today. Well, this review is probably coming out tomorrow because I got to edit the words that I'm saying right now. But as I'm jaw-jacking and lip-smacking, it is the 28th. This campaign is gonna finna start, which is kind of weird because over here, this campaign has been running for 44 days with 19 backers, but this bar is almost full as they've gotten very close to their goal. And you do have some of the key features here, although it is also on the Kickstarter campaign landing page, which I think does a better job of displaying all the key features. So the campaign is going to run for about 2 months, kind of test the waters, see if customers, controller players are excited about the features that Hex is implementing with the Phantom here, or at least excited enough to back the vision of it. And that's where I've always had a personal problem with Kickstarter campaigns. You have to really like the product or the team enough to where you believe the vision and you want to back them with your hard-earned shekels or ducats, because a lot of times these products either don't make it to market, or when they do, they go through so many changes and revisions that it's not even what was shown on the Kickstarter campaign in the first place. But I can say Hex Gaming is a reputable company. They've been making controllers since the PlayStation 4 era, and keep in mind they're an offshoot company of Extreme Rate, who has 15 plus years experience with controller accessories or parts that you can buy yourself on somewhere like Amazon. So this is a reputable company, and this is a reputable product. Not just that, this is a killer controller. In fact, there is nothing sub $200 that I would rather spend my personal money on for the PlayStation 5 platform currently. It is the easiest recommend for a custom controller in that price point, that $180 to $200 price point for the PlayStation 5/PC, and Xbox with the use of a converter or adapter as well, and Switch. So basically one controller to rule them all, to play all your platforms. Sorry, I got a little bit sidetracked there, but that campaign is going to end, and shortly after that, shipping is going to begin. So that's another problem I have with Kickstarter. You're basically pre-ordering something, spending $180, $200 and not getting anything in hand for about 3 months. But guess what? You'd be in the same situation if you ordered a controller from an already existing pro controller company. For example, my Battle Beaver controller, I waited for about 3 months with zero communication from the company, other than a little email to let me know that the triggers I had selected 2 months prior aren't in stock anymore. Cool. My Evil was about 6 weeks. Dig around the comment section of my videos, you'll see some HYPR customers that have pulled up a sleeping bag and waited about 4 months for their controller. So it already takes a long time to spec out a custom controller, especially if you're going to take the builder route where you're picking specific parts. I want a purple D-pad and lime green triggers. So waiting for a pro controller sucks. It always has, it always will. I like when they're ready to ship. I like when you can buy something like the DualSense Edge or the Elite 2 off the shelves of Best Buy or Walmart, take it home and get the flick and the sticks. Often is not the case with these custom controllers. You are speccing them out in a builder and you're waiting patiently. Now their tagline is the ultimate gaming experience, a bold claim, but a pretty bold controller as it does so much. So let's just rattle off the key features like an Uzi. The main one, the Pro Controller staple, the main feature that separates a stalker from a Pro Controller. Remappable back buttons or rear paddles. This has them. You can cover all four comfortably with just your middle fingers. They feel phenomenal, and you've got 6 custom profiles, or button bindings I should say, that you can swap on the fly. You do have a class-leading 8 included thumbstick caps, which are actually amazing, to the point where I'm not even going to use KontrolFreeks or slip-over caps. This now joins the tyrannical trio as the only 3 DualSense controllers on the market that have the adaptive triggers that get stiffer or lighter depending on the action on screen, so when you're playing a PlayStation 5 game, it's doing some things on your fingers. It's tickling your testes, so to speak. Your fingertip, it's bouncing around. But then when you actuate the digital triggers, turn them on, you're turned on as well, you get a 1.5mm mouse click, much more efficient for sending players back to the shadow realm. Rubber grips, which are some of my favorites, and a feature I have never seen, which is a way to combat stick drift, because you have this little board on the top, you have a little panel or shroud, a cover if you will, pop that off, and then you can manually adjust to make sure that your dead zone stays tight as the day you bought it. So stick drift, a way to combat that. Much more on this later. And then you've got multiple device compatibility, which we already know on the channel, just means it's for one console and PC, of course, because anything's going to work on PC. Real multi-device compatibility would be it works on PlayStation, Switch, and Xbox. But with the use of converters or adapters, that's the case. And there are some reputable gaming journalistic platforms. Well, Forbes isn't even a gaming, it's a business thing. Warren Buffett, yes, these head honchos, this top brass, all vouches for this controller, saying you're not going to get ripped off if you throw your fanny pack at this Kickstarter campaign. Hex recently made a change to the router box, and cosmetically I think it looks better than that solid lighter blue that they were using for about 3 years. However, I have never been able to bust into a Hex box without ripping this top part. It's just so tight between the inner box and the outer sleeve. Cool little reflective logo. And their catchphrase is not reflective. Customize your victory. Little blurb on the back. This is made in China. Some plugs for the socials. Oh shit, we found the gold mine over here for esports, obviously. And this is a tactical gaming controller for you operators out there. Jeep Wrangler in the driveway, German Shepherd on the leash, lower back pains and a monthly VA disability check. Yes sir, yes sir. This little pamphlet or placard is cool looking. It's going to be a thank you, as well as a guide which is leading you to their knowledge base. AIM also has what's called a knowledge base. It's a FAQ section on their website where they answer some detailed and then also surface level questions about their controllers. And then the warranty period, we're gonna talk about it later. Box lifts up from the top like Pringles. Once you pop, the fun don't. Jesus Christ, stop. You will notice a different plastic tray or holder for the thumbstick caps, vice what Hex was using previously. On the UltraX for Xbox, they did also include 8 included thumbstick caps, which I ranted and raved about how cool that was then. It's also awesome here, but you have a little bit nicer looking carrying case for them. The controller was unbelievably hard to get out of that plastic tray. There's no cutouts for your thumb, and it was in there extremely taut. And then underneath this is where you're going to have your instruction manual, or quick start guide, I should say. The controller we're going to say plenty of words about later, but in here you are going to have your included thumbstick caps as well as the tool to adjust the thumbstick modules in case you do develop stick drift over time, as this does rock potentiometer thumbstick modules, although you can also have a Hall effect module start walking the yard on you if your recentering springs start to lose tension on you, in which case a tool like this could help, but you would still have a physically weaker feeling thumbstick because that recentering spring is losing tension on you. The quick start guide's actually pretty sweet. English is the only language on here. Font is absolutely massive, very easy to read. And since this is a controller that has new features, ones that we haven't seen in any other controller, it's very important that it has crisp, clean breakouts, preferably pictures, which we do have here, no color, but don't matter. And all the features are very clearly displayed as to how to use them. Seems like common sense, but a lot of these instruction manuals just can't nail the basics. There's nothing in the instruction manual about what these puppies are, but on the bag itself, it does explain these are joystick protector rings. If you want to read the verbiage for it, it's on screen now. Also, there's a sticker on the bottom of the thumbstick cap box that says customized by number 4 engineer. All right. And as far as your included thumbstick cap options, you do have 8, 2 regular concaves, which are pretty short. Regular means like a stock controller, so really pequito, really tiny. Then you got the concave wide and long, which I personally love. They're not only high, but also really wide in diameter, giving you a lot of surface area for your thumb. Then you've got the domed longs, which I also love, as I do prefer domed over concave sticks, as long as they have enough grip. If they don't, don't, then it doesn't leave you an option and you have to go concaved. And then you have a wide but also very short concave stick. And the rubber silicone compound used is identical to what Hex was using on the Advanced X for Xbox, which I absolutely loved. Freakishly grippy, feel really nice on the fingertips. Also a cool note, they're organized pretty nicely, I guess you could say, where you have short sticks in one and then high sticks in the other. So that makes it very easy to be like, yep, I want a low boy on the left and a high rise on the right. You don't have to make your voice sound like that though. As for the cosmetics or appearance, I do have the low dome on the left and the high ass concave on the right, and it's super high. That sniper stick, if you will. Now you can bump up the in-game sensitivity a couple of clicks and make those finite movements for clicking faces. I like it. Cosmetically, I also think having mix-match sticks looks cooler, different heights, and you know, this one looks different than the one over there. It makes it look a little bit more pro-controller-y, not like every other stock factory OEM John that came with your console. I say that with a level of disgust, but there's nothing wrong with a stock controller. In fact, I have a video linked in the description below where I compare the stock Xbox and PlayStation controllers on a variety of categories. Check that out. As this is a custom controller, it of course will come in a couple of colorways, themes. I personally think this white and blue with the gray grips looks absolutely amazing. And I do like that the plastics are a flat matte white. There really is no gloss pieces on here whatsoever other than the bases of the thumbsticks, which you're never going to make contact with. Looks are completely subjective in the eyes of the beholder, but I behold a sweet piece of plastic in my hand. I'm going to go ahead and give it a 9 out of 10. You might be wondering, Kevin, what doesn't get it that extra point? A little too much branding, I would say. It says Phantom by Hex Gaming on the front, and then their catchphrase or slogan, customize your victory. I'd like if the touchpad was all white or had like a cool little hex pattern graphic on it or something, but not this fucking text on here. That's where your point got lost. Lost in translation. As for the ergonomics and comfort, if you've held a DualSense controller, you've held one of these bad boys, minus of course the rubber grips and the rear buttons, so we're going to address those two right now. The rubber grips are pretty damn good, not the best I've felt. I do prefer Aim's and the Nacon Revolution. These grips are almost perfect, but I think they lean a little bit more towards durability and a little bit less towards overall comfort, as they're not super soft and supple and nice on the fingertips, but they also feel pretty rugged, durable, like they're not going to bust apart in the next 6 to 8 months. Also, it looks like not a lot is covered. However, holding the controller normally, all the points of contact are actually covered by the rubber grips. As for the rear buttons, there is an entire section about them later where I'm going to go into the ergonomics and comfort, how to bind them to those 6 profiles that you can swap through on the fly. However, I will say it does cut into comfort negatively a little bit. For example, a stock DualSense without anything on the back is more comfortable to wrap your hands around, and this is a less comfortable design than having 4 buttons that are flush with the palm grips, maybe one there and one there, as this requires somewhat of a modified grip, as these buttons are very light, pretty easy to actuate. So you're going to have to hold it a little bit lighter and also hike up your middle finger into a slightly different position than you'd probably like to, but it does not make it uncomfortable by any means. I'm going to go ahead and give it a 7.5 out of 10. As for the perceived build quality, this little card is out to remind us about the silliness of the warranty, because that's the next segment. There are some things that raise an eyebrow in the QC department. The first one is going to be the anti-friction rings, particularly the left one doesn't seem like it's seated correctly, as you can see. Now you can see I got the macro lens, which we're also going to use to look at this abnormally large panel gap where the chin meets the rear shell. Also, there's an interesting gouge in the rubber grips, and the plastics used on this front chin piece do not feel great. Pretty savage gap over here as well. All the components feel good button-wise, but just some pretty raunchy looking panel gaps and fitment issues. Keep in mind Hex is pre-assembled extreme rate parts, so parts that you can buy on Amazon, do a teardown or disassembly of a stock DualSense and build yourself. These are done by Hex, and they only carry a 6-month warranty, which is now absolutely the shortest on the market. Scuf did have a 6-month warranty for the longest time. It has now been enhanced to a year. It's been a year for about a year now. And there is a consumer electronics law in North America where every product is supposed to have 1 year of coverage. However, it's probably not even worth it to take these companies to small claims court over a controller. So I always recommend with the budget or entry-level pads that are sold in brick and mortar stores like Walmart, or even online on something like Amazon, a third-party vendor, to take that route for purchase. However, you don't have that option with custom controllers, and you're kind of just going through their warranty policy, which is set in stone, 6 months. And they also have some verbiage in there that can kind of be a catch-all to where they don't cover anything. For example, unreasonable or excessive use of the product, including commercial use. So I guess if you're passing this bad boy across your whole esports team at a tournament or something. And then bullet point number 1, deterioration and or failure due to normal use, wear, or aging, which the company can deem pretty much anything at their discretion. That's not very confidence-inducing. As for the D-pad or direction buttons, it is a stock membrane switch, so just like a a factory OEM normal controller where you press down on right, it lifts up on left, mushy, tons of side-to-side play or wiggle. These things are also prone to failure. There's a rubber plunger mechanism underneath this plastic faceplate that can get stuck in over time. Luckily, they're pretty easy to unstick with a little teardown or disassembly, but it is very jarring when you're touching everything on a Pro controller and you're like, oh man, these bumpers are clicky, these triggers are sick, these rear buttons are mechanical, and then you touch the face buttons and D-pad and they feel just like a normal controller. They sink really far into the front faceplate and they're just not really what you expect from a Pro controller, although you kind of have to manage your expectations because this is a starting at $180 Pro controller. That is if you do the early bird special. God knows what Hex is going to jack these bad boys up to with the final retail units. So we'll say $200. We'll say this is going to be a $200 controller. It'd be awesome to have mechanical face buttons and D-pad, something with a tap life cycle. Feels a little bit better, at least in my personal opinion, but you don't generally get that in the $180 to $200 price point, as usually on the PlayStation 5 side of the house, and definitely with customs, that's like a $40 option in builders. But since Extreme Rate already offers this clicky face button kit on Amazon, it'd be sick if they could just throw that into these pre-assembled Hexes as well, because that would make this feel even more premium. But because of that, I'm going to give the D-pad and face buttons a 5 out of 5, as they feel just like a stock normal DualSense controller and kind of throw off the senses a little bit. As for the accessory button suite, this is a common point of jankage or weirdness with custom controller companies, where when they reassemble it, they don't test them and there's like a pause button that sinks really far in, or for example, in the case of this controller, the mute button, you have to press like 3 times harder than a stock controller. Also, take it, love it, leave it, hate it, whatever the hell, the PlayStation logo has been changed out for this Optimus Prime Transformers helmet looking logo. Also, the speaker grill is different than a stock controller. I personally like the stock one more, but I'm going to give the accessory button suite a 5 out of 10. Now, as for the thumbsticks, I do have the caps installed that I personally like to rock, which is the high concaved on the right and the short domed on the left. I do absolutely love all the included options, the quantity and quality of them. You have plenty of them, and I actually like each and every single one. They serve a purpose, and depending on what game I'm playing, I might actually swap them out. You do have anti-friction rings that you're going to glide along when you're at full lock on the outside of your thumbstick gates. Pressing down L3 and R3 should feel familiar because these are potentiometer thumbstick modules, the stock ones from a stock DualSense controller, and then Hex disassembles them and customizes with Extreme Rate parts, slathers on a very short 6-month warranty, and ships out what is at its core a pretty damn sick $180 to $200 Pro controller. Since these are potentiometer thumbstick modules and they're not swappable like the DualSense Edge, Hex has implemented their own system to combat the potential issue of stick drift, and that is going to be underneath this little panel or shroud. I don't know why I said it like that. I guess I got excited because it's a cool feature. Come here, you son of a... What this system allows you to do is pop off this little shroud, which doesn't come off completely. I kind of like that. Unless this snaps or breaks off, then I don't like it so much anymore. But you're going to have 4 adjustment screws. That's going to be the vertical and horizontal axis of your left and right thumbsticks. And you could probably use your own tool, a little screwdriver, but it does include a tool as well. Hex branded, of course. This is just plastic, so be careful because you could break it. But you use this to jack down or loosen up these set screws, testing in Gamepad Tester until you're back at neutral and no longer have stick drift. Not a bad system. Because the included thumbstick cap options are so good quality and quantity wise, you got 8 of them and they're actually pretty damn good. I'm not even going to rock KontrolFreeks, but having had tested them, only the PS4 and 5 caps actually work, and as you can see, this one's still kind of whoppy jawed on there because all these sticks are wider than standards, especially the ones that are labeled as wides. This one is not. This is just the standard dome, which you can get on, but it could damage the caps because it's really soft and supple rubber around this dotted section on the outside, so I wouldn't really risk damaging the already good stock caps to put on KontrolFreeks, considering they don't want to go on. Over here in Gamepad Tester, and we can see that these potentiometer thumbstick modules aren't snapping back to a perfect resting value. In fact, that left module is wandering the yard a little bit. There's no drift in game to speak of on the PC or PlayStation 5 side of the house any further out of this crosshair, and I'll be busting out that little plastic tool to tighten up the dead zone. Cool that there's an option to do that, but also not great that this came out of the box looking like moving, stopping, boom, right there. That's my neutral. It's meh. Circularity test, shall we? Exactly what we've come to expect from mass-produced potentiometer thumbstick modules from the likes of Alps and others, which are generally between 12 and 16% on the Xbox and PlayStation side of the house and a little bit more on the Switch Pro controllers. Also, worse results on the left, which is the one that was wandering out of neutral a little bit. A cause for concern? Perhaps, but not now. The gameplay felt smooth as butter with these suckers, and I do like the system that they implemented. I don't like it as much as having either Hall effect thumbstick modules that are far less likely to get stick drift in the first place, or some kind of a swappable option like what Victrix, or PDP I should say, does with their Victrix controllers. Although, not really, because they're going to be selling modules, but they don't just yet. But the DualSense Edge from Sony, when those are in stock, you can swap those modules out. That's a better system than this. Tightening modules that are already starting to get janky on you. They're already starting to drift away from neutral, maybe having a harder time reaching the outside of your thumbstick gates or getting to full lock. So other issues are going to arise along with that walking neutral, or stick drift developing, I should say. So it's kind of like you're polishing a turd at that point. You're tightening up a thumbstick module that's already starting to go out on you. So it's kind of like a band-aid fix, but like a really good band-aid fix. I mentioned the Dpad and Face buttons being membrane kind of threw off the senses with all the other clicky mechanical bits, and you definitely get that with the bumpers as well, considering the triggers do have a nice mechanical 1.5mm squeeze. Talk about those in just a sec. But then the bumpers are stock membrane switches, which is not a big deal from a performance standpoint, considering bumpers are already a very short actuation, and they're not really a common point of failure either, so skimping out and going with stock bumpers is not a huge deal. But it would be nice from a feeling standpoint, a damn, this is a premium pro controller sensation to have mechanical bumpers to match its trigger comrades up here. These are currently the 3 best trigger systems for the PlayStation 5, and that's based on dozens of designs that I've tested. A main factor of that is that this still maintains the adaptive trigger motors, which can produce a variety of effects in third-party games, and definitely in SIE or Sony Interactive Entertainment first-party titles, where they really make the most out of the haptic feedback and adaptive trigs. Features that if you hate, you can simply turn off. But a lot of custom controllers on the market go for a digital mechanical mouse click, but it's always engaged. You can't modulate the throttle and brake in a racing game, or play any game where you need to hold down the trigger halfway or whatever. The problem with the DualSense Edge is that in its stoppiest stop mode, its third step or stage, there's still a lot of take up or dead end slop, which luckily is cut out by software to where as soon as you press this sucker, you're shooting your gun on screen, but you still have all this extra take up. So you fire your gun and then you got all this here. And the middle point is completely pointless, does absolutely nothing. I can't think of an application where that's going to be practical using the halfway stop. Get it out of my face. The Aimback Pro from AIM has been praised or lauded as having the best PS5 system since this was introduced, and the Phantom came extremely close to dethroning it. And I will say I like the actuation method, these levers, a little bit more because it makes it easier to engage and disengage them in game while you are still facing the screen. You don't have to flip the controller around or anything. As where these bad boys are a little more finicky, and I've also had it a couple times to where I thought they were engaged, but they really weren't, and I pressed down the trigger and then it forced this lever out and I was in some kind of a weird halfway stage mark, so that's kind of funky. But truth of the matter is, when these are engaged, they require the perfect balance of resistance, and also they are the shortest squeeze at under 0.5mm. Boom. That's your actuation. Right? As we're on the Hex Phantom, these have a 1.5mm squeeze, which you might prefer if you like that little bit of take up or ramp up, but unfortunately this has a not fully faulty, but definitely not how this is supposed to feel out of the box, left trigger. I'm going to engage the macro lens to show you what I'm talking about. So on the right trigger, which is luckily for shooting, so a little bit more important than aiming down sights in my opinion, this is how it's supposed to work. It's where you get a nice even amount of resistance and then a click or actuation. So 1.5mm of take up, all even pressure or resistance, and a click. The right over here is not. It's virtually no resistance. This is just kind of partially broken, I would say. There's no resistance at all, and then it clicks. Sorry about how disgusting my hands look. This is a macro lens. I know I need to lotion my hands. These are a working man's hands. But if these did feel perfectly even to where the right one wasn't partially faulty and it felt like it's supposed to, it still has 1.5mm of take up, which in comparison to the less than 0.5mm of the aim, and also the actuation does feel more crisp on the aim to where even if you're wearing a headset or blasting your surround sound, you get a nice tactile click on your finger. As we're over here, these feel a little bit sloppy, for lack of a better word. But I will say, this is a great system considering it still has the adaptive triggers and they are a shorter actuation than the DualSense Edge. So I would deem currently first place to the Aimback still, second place to the Hex Phantom, and third place to the DualSense Edge. But these are the best 3 trigger systems for the PS5 currently. The Phantom has a very good rear button suite. You can rebind them on the fly. You have 6 profiles for those button bindings, which are easily indicated by the LED light, which we'll talk about in just a second. And if you prefer 4 rear button designs where you can cover all 4 of the rear inputs with your middle fingers, where I can hit the bottom with the tips and then kind of roll upwards, and with the ball, this little bony McBoy here, hit these top 2 buttons, then this is absolutely perfect. Now in the past I've said that I prefer having 4 rear buttons and 4 fingers, an individual button covering each one of those rear buttons. However, over time I would say it's a direct draw, as there are several controllers that I own, such as my Battleweaver DualSense, where I can cover all 4 of the buttons with just my middle fingers, and I absolutely love that layout. The cool thing is that Hex now has an option for Xbox players that prefer having their fingers fanned out, where you've got buttons down here and buttons up here with the advanced controller, which I love. Then there's the UltraX, which has better components and parts across the board except the rear buttons. I do prefer more on the advanced. This is very similar to the UltraX's Xbox design, but converted over to PlayStation, where you can cover all 4 of them with 1 finger, or 1 finger per side, I should say. The plastics used are good. There's no rubber coating back here and no dots or stippling, but you don't really need it because the plastics used are great. And I can access all 4 of the buttons simultaneously very easily, where I can actuate these puppies and then kind of roll up and actuate the top 2 very easily as well. So full coverage with 2 fingers, love that. Also, you can rebind on the fly, and that does include clicking down the left and right sticks and the touchpad, but not the accessory buttons like pause and share. Although why would you want to give up a rear button binding for one of those buttons? I'm going to stand off to the side because I look bad enough in good light. So you have 6 profiles, and to swap between them you do double click. A single click does absolutely nothing, so you double click, you get a color indicator. You know what, let's cut more lights, yeah? Bam. And on the 7th profile, which isn't really a profile, when the light goes off completely, that means that the rear buttons are null and void. They're completely disabled, turned off. Press it again. We're now on the first profile, which is blue. I'm going to hold down for 3 seconds. It is going to begin to flash, letting us know that we are in remapping mode. Now you're going to hold down simultaneously the rear button and face button or D-pad that you want bound. So I'm going to hold down this guy and X, or cross I should say. You're going to get fast red flashes if it did bind successfully, and slow red flashes if it was not successful, meaning it was already bound to that. And if you want to unbind the button, then you simply repeat the process. The same button binding, it'll overwrite and then cancel it out. So 2 things I don't like is, 1, you have to hold down the buttons for 3 seconds to bind each one, and you're already in remapping mode, so you should just be able to hold down, bam, bam, bam. But it doesn't work like that. You have to hold down each button for 3 seconds. Once you are done binding, hold down the remapping button for 3 seconds to put it back into usable mode. And one thing I don't like here is that this light is always on. So when you have the rear buttons engaged, probably going to be always because it's a pro controller with sick ass rear buttons, this light is on, slightly draining the battery, and also it's not super bright or disorienting, but I don't really want RGB distracting me from my gameplay. So I would like these could turn off after about 5 seconds. You can see what profile you're in, and then they time out, turn off after about 5 seconds. That'd be great. I really do like this rear button design. It's a big step up from what Hex was currently offering. They're 2 rear button, and then they're 4 rear button. This bad boy that I've tested, I've actually tested multiple colorways of that controller. I wasn't a huge fan of those because the 2 inner buttons you have to stretch for. This feels so much more intuitive, more comfortable. I'm liking what I'm seeing here, other than the 2 small gripes I had with the rebinding process. I'm gonna go ahead and give this rear button suite a 9 out of 10. Repeat, 9 out of 10.
As far as battery life, it is identical to a stock DualSense controller, which isn't phenomenal, but if you want to hear all about that, check out the stock Xbox versus PlayStation controller comparison video, or there's an entire DualSense Edge battery debacle video where I talk about why the DualSense Edge actually has worse battery life than the standard DualSense, physically smaller battery. There you go, saved you some time. Gamepad LA lets me know there's a DualSense, so I'm going to press 1 and enter, 1 and enter again. I'm going to rotate that left stick. I'm not going to stop once I start. Yeah, so around 4 milliseconds of input lag or delay on that factory 250 hertz dot clock that we know is on the DualSense controllers. Stability, it's exactly where you would expect it to be, pinned. Also pretty consistent here. Jitter, low. This is what we like to see. X input test, would you like to confirm that with us? Long-term viewers of the channel are going to be very happy to find out that I did finally order that GPDL or GDPL. I'm mixing up those 4 letters, I know I am, but that device to measure input lag or delay directly on the board. I've used one of those devices. Of course, we got to spoof the PC into thinking this is an Xbox 360 controller. We're going to launch Rewas to do that. Now, I've used those devices in the past, and in my experience, the results are very similar, usually identical, on par with the software programs that I use in my testing, but it's always good to get the most accurate reading possible, and that is indeed going to be from the PCB, the printed circuit board with those leads connected to the nipples of the board. So that's going to be implemented in all the input lag or delay sections in my future reviews as soon as I set up that Arduino device. So we got a sexy ass DualSense over here, and you know what we're going to do with it. We're going to move me over there so you can see me click on switch to 360. We're going to apply to slot 1.
I'm gonna move myself again so you can see that it's active over here. We're gonna hop back into X input test. This time it knows that it's a Xbox 360 controller, and we know that we're gonna get about 4 seconds of input lag or delay on a 250 hertz stock clock. Righteously consistent as well. Well, that doesn't reflect it, but you gotta keep in mind we got 10 outliers here throwing off our results. Run another test, please, Kevin. I don't know why I'm talking to myself like I'm a different person. Speaking to one of my low-level employees right now. Kevin, go ahead and run a test and have that on my desk before lunch. Wow, that's even worse, but you know what? It's that one major outlier, which is going to be one large number at the top. When I first started spinning the sticks, it's going to throw off our average. I'm ready to overclock the shit out of this controller, as it is a Sony controller, which are very susceptible to overclocking. They like it. Let's do it to her. Close, close, close. Turn off ReWASD. In the Lord of Mice overclocking program, select from the drop down all so you can see what's going on here. It is going to be this DualSense wireless controller, around 6 milliseconds of input lag or delay. Stock clock. Let's do the thing to it. Install service. So I've been doing a ton of diagnostic work off camera. I actually uninstalled and reinstalled X input, Lord of Mice, and ReWASD, and I figured out, I cracked the DaVinci Code, boys. Here's the issue. With the latest update for ReWASD, which is a big one, probably the biggest that we've had since the launch of the service, because it now opens up compatibility with a lot of launchers for online multiplayer games such as COD and Apex Legends, which as of recent have been blocking the ReWASD service running in the background. It used to be no big deal, but then it got deemed as a nefarious program, so started getting blocked. But now ReWASD has updated and unblocked the service so you can run it to do things like remapping the rear buttons and customizing your thumbstick axes, or response curves, I should say, things like that, customizing the feel of your controller for gameplay. But the problem is you can only overclock in the Lord of Mice and measure that overclock to prove to yourself that it did take effect in Gamepad LA. This is with a DualSense controller, by the way, because it's going to be in DualSense wireless mode. But whenever you run ReWASD to spoof the PC into thinking it's an Xbox 360 controller, so it converts it into X input, you're still getting a successful overclock and you are able to measure it in Gamepad LA. But X input, which is my preferred method of measuring input lag or delay, other than the physical means of disassembling a controller and measuring with a GPDL Arduino device, as far as the 3 software programs out there, DS4, ReWASD, and X input, that allow you to measure the input lag or delay, I've had the best results with X input over the last 4 or 5 years. It gives you the most data. You can see what your controller's doing. And unfortunately, what it is doing is showing me that I'm still at 4 milliseconds, so a stock clock of 250 hertz, when I know in my heart of hearts that I am overclocked at 1000 hertz, and that's being reflected in Gamepad LA. Having said that, this controller is not polling rate locked at the board or some weird craziness like that, and it will successfully get under 1 millisecond of input lag or delay on 1000, 4000, or 8000 hertz clock if you like to go that high. 1000 is good for me. As for converter or adapter support, I am proud to report that you have full unrestricted wireless and wired access to the Xbox Series S and X with the Brook Accessories XB2, and you can play on the Switch as well with the NS2 adapter. So as for the pros, cons, and verdict, I'm going to start with the cons, shortcomings, or areas of improvement. That warranty has been at 6 months for a long time, much longer than it should have been. I bashed Scuff up and down the metaphorical block, and eventually, I'm not saying it was because of me, probably the horde of unpleased customers over the years that did enhance that or double that to 1 year. I'd like if the warranty was extended, please. There's also larger panel gaps around the chin and bumper region than I'd like to see. Nothing that raises a huge cause for concern, but if you just spent $200 on a Pro controller, these are the kind of gaps and fitment issues you don't like to see. Bumpers, D-pad, and face buttons are all membrane, which kind of throws off your brain when everything else is mechanical and feels phenomenal. But for cost-cutting measures, I do understand. The bumpers, that's totally fine. I covered during the bumper section why that isn't an issue to be mechanical or not, but the D-pad and face buttons, especially since Extreme Rate does offer a pretty cost-effective kit, it'd be fantastic if they could just offer it in these pre-installed Hex controllers. Cosmetically, the branding on the touchpad throws off the looks a little bit. If it was all white, I think that would look better. Remapping the rear buttons is an absolute breeze. I just wish that the LED indicator light showing you which profile you're in dimmed after a few seconds, or completely turned off, I should say, and that it was a little bit quicker to bind on the fly, because you could just hold down the rear button and front button you want bound for a second, not 3 to 4 seconds, which adds up. The next con is the fact that you can't get these bad boys yet. You can buy them. It's a Kickstarter project. You can back the vision that Hex has for this pretty impressive gamepad, but you're not going to get it in hand for at least 2.5 months. On to the pros, because I think there are a ton. The included thumbstick cap options, quantity and quality wise, there are a bunch of them, and I like each one of them for different use case scenarios. This trigger lock system I would deem second place out of all the PS5 trigger lock or stop systems on the market, behind only the Aimback Pro. The rear buttons are phenomenal, especially if you like to be able to cover all 4 of the buttons with just your middle fingers. So 2-finger 4 rear button coverage, it works here and it works really well. 6 onboard profiles that you can swap very quickly and easily with an indicator light showing you which one you're in. Really cool. The rubber grips, while not the best that I've felt, do feel like they're going to be durable in the long run and feel better than just straight up plastic. And last but not least, the stick drift counteracting measure. If you do get stick drift where you can top off that little shroud or cover, use the included tool to tighten up the vertical and horizontal axes of the left and right thumbstick module. That's cool, not as good as having Hall effect thumbstick modules or swappable potentiometer modules, but this is a 3rd place contender and better than just having to chuck out a $300 Pro controller. So as for the verdict, this is now the easiest to recommend custom PS5 controller. So other than the DualSense Edge, which is not a custom, that's just a premium or pro controller, one size fucks all. Whatever you got from Best Buy is the same one that your buddy bought at Walmart or your friend bought from PlayStation Direct. But as far as customizing, specking out in a builder, or buying these pre-assembled customs that already have multicolored themes or colorways, Hex offers the best value. They are packing the most features into the lowest price point as of current. It is pretty close with AIM, I will say, as they start at $180 for the Aimback Pro and do have a not even comparably better warranty, because we're going from 6 months to a lifetime. Granted, that's only 45 days on the thumbsticks, which I find unacceptable, but a lot of the other components covered for an entire lifetime, yours and the controllers. But there is simply no denying the Phantom's value at $180. At least that's the early bird special price at Kickstarter, which I'm hoping Hex keeps it around that $180 to $200 range, because it will be a very easy to recommend custom controller, because it looks, feels, and performs like some of the big boys that are $300 or more. Combine this with the fact that Hex has a pretty phenomenal quality control reputation in the custom controller world. You don't hear a lot of complaints, not nearly as much as any of the other custom controller companies, HYPR being the one to really steer clear of, and then all the rest of them you hear scattered complaints. Hey, my Evil broke on me, my Battle Beaver sucks ass, AIM's the worst company in the world, Cinch is a turd burglar, whatever. If you go through the comment sections of the reviews for all those custom controllers that I've reviewed, you're going to hear some horror stories of people that have had bad experiences. You're also going to hear some really satisfied customers in there as well. Hex seems to sway a lot more towards, man, I got a hell of a pro controller and it's lasted me a long time, versus, man, this thing just disintegrated in my hand. And if you are in that latter camp, it's a little bit worrisome because there's only a 6-month warranty in place. And keep in mind, if you do have a little bit of DIY knowledge, all of these parts or components for the Phantom can be bought individually on Amazon and installed on a stock DualSense controller, although keep in mind at that point you have no warranty. The Phantom overall is a phenomenal custom PS5 controller and the easiest to recommend because, like I said, it offers the most for the least. The most price to performance, the most bang for buck as of now. It is linked in the description below if you want to check it out. That is going to be the link for the Kickstarter campaign, as that's currently the only way to back this controller or even check it out. But in about 3 months or so, expect to see it on the Hex website right there in the model lineup for PS5. Drop in the comment section below what you Stallions are using to play on PS5 or whatever the hell you play on, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers, so this information will reach and assist them as well. Much like the back of the TV, I've got plugs for all of my socials down there in the description below. And your wallet will greatly thank you if you check the description, because there are exclusive discounts on a ton of products, including controllers, KontrolFreeks, keyboards, mouse pads, clothes, and energy drinks. And keep in mind that you, the viewer, keep this channel running. The more Stallions and Stallionettes trotting around the stable, the better, so mollywop that subscribe button like it owes you money, and we'll have the same amount of fun tomorrow.